By molecular count, not by volume, we're 99% water. And there are more water molecules in our bodies than all the stars in the perceivable universe. So just being told H2O, it just doesn't seem to cut it. I have been working in this field of freezing water to a specific stage. This is when water is liquid and ice, and the ice is just starting to form, and you can see light coming out. I actually think it is light that paves the way for the imagery of my work. And what we're seeing is essentially patterns and symbols and art in ice. What I have seen is that water reads potentials. I can put a sunflower seed in the water. It doesn't design the seed. It will design the outcome of the seed. It will design the flower. You can't study water without studying light. You are studying light when you're studying water, meaning that water is a lighthouse, a container of light. And we don't see it as just something that we drink or that takes away our waste or that we bathe in. Many cultures believe that it is the house of their ancestors, a house of light, a house of the Creator. For me, water is definitely a kind of spiritual teacher, teaching me how to be transparent, how that it is a mirror, and I think it is a mirror of something divine.
I know just from listening to a few of your other podcasts about the car accident that you had.
Mm-hmm.
Did that kind of spark this whole journey in a way?
It was really where I started questioning this concept of what is water. So it did get me into the work, and a lot of people have found it really interesting because I didn't just decide to start studying water because that was already a fascination. It happened from a healing journey, and then I became curious about how this water could have healed me, and that led me into more inquiry from there.
Let's start there then.
Sure.
Yeah. So where are you from? So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Auckland, New Zealand.
Okay.
And it was a very sweet little place that we lived. And New Zealand is a beautiful country. It was a really nice time to grow up back then.
Yeah, it's like the most beautiful country.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's magical. Maori. You're part Maori, is that right?
My father is.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I started a brand here at my company called Maori Hook.
Oh,
and
really?
It's based on. I went to the French Polynesian for my honeymoon, and was just so inspired by the culture and just the beauty of the islands there, the island life, and kind of realized that we don't really have that represented in the United States, and it's such a beautiful culture that I wanted to create a brand that kind of tried to encapsulate some of that. So
that's really nice.
Yeah.
You probably heard the story of how Maui fished up the North Island.
Right.
With his grandmother's jawbone. So they said that they call the South Island the mainland because it was considered to be the only land for a while until Maui went out in his fishing boat with his brothers and ended up using this fish hook made of his grandmother's jawbone and fished the entire North Island up. Wow. Which is a kind of interesting concept. The two are really different. I'm sure you know. Mm-hmm. Have you been there?
Not to New Zealand. No, not yet. No, but I do want to go.
Yeah.
And that is what Moana was inspired from. Right?
That's true.
Yeah.
It's interesting how some of the stories are through Polynesia.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what was it like growing up there? What was early life like?
In New Zealand?
Mm-hmm.
It was lovely, really. I used to go to Mount Eden Normal Primary School. I always wondered, I said, Mama, why is it called normal? And because I don't really know that is reflective of everybody. And she would always laugh and she would just say, that's just what they call it. And then I went to a intermediate school, which was my favorite part, I think, of growing up in that kind of age between 10 and 12. It was called Kowhai Intermediate. And I had a teacher there that I was always so inspired by called Mrs. Fletcher. And she really loved the way I thought and wrote. And I always had such an interest in the ancient world. And then when I went to Auckland Girls Grammar after that, I became best friends with my Latin teacher, which is really not very common at all. But I was a complete geek. Like, I loved everything to do with the ancient world. And I was also an artist, so I loved to paint. After that, I ended up painting professionally, actually, and I started university as well to become an archaeologist. And then my mum got very sick, and so I prioritized her over everything else. Yeah. Yeah. But New Zealand, it is a beautiful place. We used to go camping out in Waipu Cove and go in the caves. And New Zealand's so beautiful because you're never very far away from a beach, from the forest. Then there's the geothermal in Rotorua. And, you have these beautiful mountains. So it's got a little bit of the best of everything in two islands that actually feel really different. Yeah.
Yeah, fast. I can't wait to go there. Can't wait to go. Yeah, it's beautiful. And the Lord of the Rings, I guess, right, was filmed there famously.
Yep.
Yeah,
Everyone knows about Lord of the Rings.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So you were in a car accident. This was what, 25 years ago or so?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me about this experience, because this really sort of shaped your future after that event.
Yeah, it did. Well, so many good things come out of tragedy. So about 25 years ago, like you said, I was in a horrendous car accident and we went under a 7-ton truck, rolled twice, and the driver died immediately. And it was considered one of the worst accidents in New Zealand where someone survived, and I was the passenger. And an interesting addition to that is that the man who was driving behind us witnessed everything, and the car actually had started to spark. I was knocked unconscious, but came around as soon as the car stopped rolling. And the man driving behind, he actually owned a MiG fighter jet, and he was showing it around New Zealand, and he was wearing a fireproof outfit. And so he heard me cry out, and the car was on its side. It was a really dangerous situation, and he risked his life to come and save me and get me out of the car, which is really amazing. And then over the course of 20 odd years, I had 8 surgeries, mostly for bowel surgery, where the seatbelt had crushed my internal organs, and also for stage 4 endometriosis.
Is that the car?
Yes, that's the car.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's a miracle I'm alive.
Absolute miracle.
Yeah.
Wow.
So when I say I had a few injuries, you can kind of appreciate why.
Right.
And then on that 8th surgery, they put a stent in my small bowel, because the scar tissue where they would cut it and reattach it would grow. So they put a stent in my bowel, my small bowel, and then I woke up. And I was surrounded by doctors, and they were like, well, you didn't recover very well, and now you have showers of blood clots in your lungs. And now you're going to have to take warfarin, which is a blood thinner, for potentially the rest of your life. And I was so shocked to hear this, because outside of the car accident issues, I've always looked after myself, been living very holistically, I've been very well. And so to be told I have to be on this medication, which is a big deal for the rest of my life, was shocking. But they said, you're going to die if you don't do this. So for 3.5 months, I took warfarin. And then I had a clean chest x-ray. But they said, well, you better continue on with this medication. And I was very reluctant to do so. And I did something which was based off something that had already happened. So I decided to go on my own natural healing journey and to stop taking warfarin. And one of the reasons, and it's obviously not advice for anyone else, but one of the reasons was because 3 doctors had told me I would never be able to have children based off the amount of scar tissue on my reproductive organs as well from the accidents. And I'd already had a child for every doctor that told me I couldn't. And clearly not out of defiance, they're all little miracles. But I have an ability to put what someone tells me on the shelf and let my body make its own decision for itself. And that was a very helpful piece. So I knew that my body could heal itself. And so I went and I saw a friend who's a medical doctor, but also practices Ayurvedic medicine. And I said, where should I start? And he said, I would recommend you start with the foundation of life. He said, why don't you start with a naturally alkaline spring water? We have so many springs in New Zealand, and most spring water is naturally alkaline, something above a 7 in pH, which stands for power or potential of hydrogen. And so I thought, well, that's easy, just drink water. So I went and I collected different spring waters and I put myself on 2-week trials, and I didn't change anything, not my skincare routine, my diet, or any of these things. And other than feeling hydrated, I didn't really notice anything specific. By this time, I have a wellness center. I have some gifts of healing. And one of my clients came and said, there's this man, this old guy, has his own private source of water, and it's a 9.9 in pH out of the ground naturally. And he's only giving it to cancer patients, and they seem to be having some amazing success, and maybe he'll give you some. So I went and saw him, and he gave me a month's worth of water to try. And on day 3, I noticed a change in something so many people in the West don't really want to talk about, but in the East it's much more common, and that's really bowel motions. I mean, there are so many people trying to push out a pebble for an hour, and this is more common than you might think. And after having so much bowel surgery, I noticed, things are moving. This is really good. There's a change. Day 10 came around and I had lots of bumps coming up on my arm on the right side and on my jaw. And they were really painful. And one seemed so angry that when I put my finger over it, I'm like, I think there's something in here. It feels sharp. So as disgusting as it sounds, I got some tweezers and I pulled this little shard of green glass out of my arm. And between day 10 and 12, I'd picked 27 pieces of green glass out of my arm and jaw that had been embedded in my body for over 20 years because the man who died owned a nightclub. And in the back of the car
since the accident,
were crates of Steinlager beer, which is like a lager in a green glass bottle. And when the car rolled, my right side got more green glass and my left side got more windscreen. And I was like, how the heck is this possible?
It was forcefully like injected underneath your skin, and it just sat there for 20 years. Is that what
it did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And nurses spent a good 4 days picking glass out of me. And every now and then, every couple of years or so, one little piece would start to make its way out. But to have this much glass come out of me all at once was shocking. And I was like, I know there's only one thing I've done different here. The only thing I've done is drink this water.
Right. I watched one of your podcasts, and so I knew that the glass, that you had taken some glass out from underneath your skin, but I didn't realize that it had been there for 20 years, and that that alkaline water is the reason that it started to come out. I must have missed that part, but that's absolutely incredible.
Well, I really wanted to understand how. Like, how did that water do that?
Yeah.
And I think that there might be there's 2 ways I've been looking at it. And it's been a constant, progress of understanding more and more how water works and how different waters work, and that all water is not the same. And my first hypothesis was like, well, I think that all people have their own frequency song. There are trillions of cells in our body, all kind of like musicians in a way. And all together, they create your own song. And it was like I had drunk this water, which seemed to have some kind of high frequency, and it added a player into the orchestra of my body. And that player was like a opera singer that could sing a very high note. And that was like my first visual that I got, like thinking, well, how could this be working? Because I went to an analysis and it was like, oh, there's high bicarb in here, which is what's making it naturally alkaline. There's this, a lot of different total dissolved solids and minerals and to make it this special water. But I couldn't understand what was going on until I started to research more about 4th phase water. And we have 4 phases that we're aware of so far. I believe there are more. But we have a liquid, a solid, gas, and then a type of gel or plasma. And that gel or plasma, sometimes known as 4th phase water, has more viscosity. So imagine what aloe vera looks like. It's got more stretch. It absorbs more light. It has negative charge and an ordered molecular structure. And there's been a lot of blanket statements of this term called structured water. But if you were to ask Dr. Jerry Pollack, who wrote The Fourth Phase of Water, he would explain it as exclusion zone, sometimes known as EZ zone. And this type of water is fourth phase water, essentially, is where you have an extra hydrogen and oxygen atom. So it's actually H3O2. And this is the kind of water inside of your cells. And you can find this type of water outside of your body in water. So when they look for it in a lab, it's quite interesting. You have your vessel of water, you put something called microspheres in it that allow you to see movement. Then you put a Nafion tube, which is a see-through hydrophilic tube, and then you look down a microscope. And what you see is the water that is exclusion zone water, which I'll explain even more in a minute, is where it self-propels through the tube with no assistance. And the way it can do that is that when you have a hydrophilic surface or a water-loving surface, the exclusion zone starts to form. So it creates this negative charge by pushing everything that's in the water outside of itself, all of the solids outside of itself. And then you're left with this kind of bulk water, which is positively charged. When you have a negative and a positive, you have a battery. And so this is sort of like the battery of your cells. And so by understanding this and that this kind of water builds on a hydrophilic surface, well, glass is a hydrophilic surface. So it could be very well that this exclusion zone started to build because we found there was this type of water inside the water I was drinking. And it could have helped to push that glass out of my skin and get it closer to the surface.
Wow. And did you had no idea that it was there, that the glass was there?
No, I had no idea.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I just think I'm lucky to be alive. We have traces. You can see some of the scars on my arm, but there were traces of like gravel in there and things. And because every now and then a bit of glass would come out, I thought, well, there might be a little bit, but I had no idea it was all in there.
And have you talked to anybody in like the scientific community about this? And what do they say about this? Are they like, oh my God, that's a miracle? Or are they like, oh yeah, of course that would happen?
Well, I wanted to talk to as many people, and no one said that.
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk to as many people as possible to try to understand like what was happening and try to get this gauge of like, no, I drank this water, so there is a link. But how can just drinking a special type of water purge me? And the people that ended up, that guy ended up selling his property, and there's some wonderful people that live just up the road. They have an aquifer that is the same, it's the same water. And they've been having so many people have all kinds of amazing healing stories. But one of the things that they did a test to see how many microplastics were in their blood, because so many people have microplastics now just from living in the world, right? And they only drink this water. That's all they drink because it comes out their tap, it's out their shower, it's on their property, it's their natural water source. And they had the smallest amount of microplastics that they had seen anyone have when they tested it. But what was interesting is you could see exclusion zone water all around the microplastics. It had started to build and push them around and start to push them in a way that looks like they're trying to push it out somehow. And so the microplastics are a polymer, a type of polymer. Not just all plastic is just like, not all plastics are the same. And so when they talked to Dr. Jerry Pollack about it, he was saying, well, it could be exclusion zone that is actually helping get rid of some of these things. And perhaps it's one of the reasons that they have so little amount of microplastics in them. So that's as best that I've got so far as to my answer as to how this actually worked. But it wasn't only me. My dad's, he was drinking some of this water. And I said, I was trying to say, oh, everybody should, why don't you try drinking it and see what happens? And he is a famous fisherman in New Zealand called Bill. And so he had a fishing situation where a fish fin had gone between his knuckles. And when he started to drink this water, he thought he'd got all of the fish fin out all those years ago. But this big bulge started to come up between his knuckles, and this bit of fish fin that was like almost looked fossilized started to come out when he picked it out. People's eyesight. So I had,
Do you
sorry,
have pictures of that?
of my dad's.
Yeah.
No, I don't have the
Okay.
pictures.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So then I started trialing people in my wellness center on the water. And one thing across the board was that everybody's eyesight improved. And your eye lens is 99% highly ordered structured water. So we see the world through the lens of water. Everybody's energy improved. One man had stage 4 cancer, and he wanted to do a long water fast before he even started going down the track of chemotherapy or any of those kinds of things. So he fasted for 27 days on this water, and then halfway through, they found that his tumor had reduced by half. And then 3 weeks after the fast, they found, well, they called it spontaneous healing. He no longer had cancer. And there were 2 other cases where people fasted for between 10 days and 15 days and saw a significant reduction in their tumor. Now, is it the water? Is it something else? Well, at that point, the only thing they were putting in their body was this water. So there is definitely some link there. We've seen one lady who had tried to get pregnant for years get pregnant in the first month of drinking it. And so I saw story after story after story after story. Skin healing, people starting to look younger, people starting to say, I can't actually come off this because it's like the fountain of youth. People losing weight.
I was going to say the fountain of youth. That's exactly what it sounds like.
Yeah.
So, and it's all of these cases, all of these people, the cancer, the fish fin, all of these examples are from this one property. Am I hearing that right?
It's from the same aquifer.
Okay.
All from the same aquifer. This is a very large underwater kind of lake, or it's like an artesian water. So they're pulling it up out of the ground from very, very deep down. And it almost has a sort of viscosity around it. It's slightly sweet, actually, in its taste. And you can tell if your body is clean enough, you can tell that it tastes different than other waters. But you have to be kind of clean in your body to really start to be sensitive to that.
And is it public knowledge where this aquifer is?
Yeah, it's out in Riverhead. The people that have access to bringing it up. So it's not a spring where you can just go and collect it. So it is an artisan water that is bringing up. So these people, they have been so conscious. They have had it blessed by the Maori of the land, and they even use all my protocols so the water doesn't see light, because we've seen that these water structures, especially with a spring water or an artisan water that's coming up out of the ground, is extremely sensitive to light, particularly artificial light like humans. And the structure that we see when it comes out is a very large hexagonal pattern. But that pattern begins to degrade. Within 72 hours, it will look quite different when exposed to light. And so they keep it out of the light. And they've even seen that it glows this kind of blue color as it goes into the units that they have it in, which are in a kind of dark box. And they have it available for people. And in their first year of having it out there and me just sharing my story, they have had over 200 stories easily of people having healing experiences.
And is the local community writing stories about this and
they've been doing lots of their own research. They will be doing a clinical trial as well, because someone's I think their kidney, they were only working on one kidney, 1.5 kidneys really, and the kidney started to grow after
Wow.
drinking this water.
Wow.
So no, I can tell you who they are, and that's certainly public.
Okay. Cool. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
And so is there a way to create this to recreate this water or to get the exact same chemical composition outside of this natural spring?
well, I would say that there are probably a lot of healing waters around the world. Right. One of them would be like the Hunza Valley. And the example I'm going to give you relates to what you've said. I think nature always does it best, and nature does it on purpose. I don't think there are any mistakes when it comes to water. So there is in northern Pakistan, there is an area called the Hunza Valley. And over the last 100 years or so, people have gone to this Hunza Valley and seen that it's a blue zone where people live the longest with the best health. And there are various blue zones, but not a lot. There are several around the world, and this is one of them. And many people were like, how come these people, are so healthy and there's no degeneration of their eyesight or heart failure or anything? And it's normal for them to live past 100. And so they ended up going and living with them for a little while. And they actually put it down to the fact that their main source of water is glacial water, this particular type of water. And glacial water or glacial melt is essentially between a liquid and a solid. And that essentially is where this fourth phase water is. It's between a liquid and a solid. So it has more viscosity. It's not exactly an ice. It's not exactly a liquid. And so they were just drinking this type of water. And they also had a lot of apricots. They ate a lot of apricots and they did all kinds of stuff with the apricots. So there was that. But there was a team of scientists who were like, well, we need to recreate this. And I think it's a man called, I can't remember his first, Patrick Flanagan, I think. And he was also working with this type of water and realized there was a high quantity of colloidal silica in this water that they were drinking. So that was his separate piece. They also found fourth phase, that it was kind of fourth phase. But then there were other scientists from Japan and various other places that went to recreate it in a lab. And actually, that's where all of the ionizing machinery and machines kind of came from, trying to recreate this natural water in a laboratory. And the Hunza Valley water was also naturally alkaline. So what they did was try to find these qualitative aspects of this healthy water. I'm not an advocate of ionizing water because there's a big difference. It's not just about high pH or any of those things. It's about stability and how nature created something for me anyway. I realize that everyone has their different opinions. So what I found personally.
But if you can't get to New Zealand,
No, it's not. Yeah. I mean, there are natural alkaline waters around the world.
yeah,
It's not hard to find. There's a lot of spring waters. And I would say go find naturally alkaline water. There's a place called Find a Spring, and you can find a local spring. We were in Sedona recently, and there's this beautiful spring water that you can just go to the side of the road and just collect. And it's got beautiful structure. I've heard people tell me healing properties that it has. And so it's not that this is the only healing water in the world. I think that people can start doing their own research, find out where the stories are. Where are the healing stories about different waters? You'll find that many people have them, especially around springs and water that comes from deep under the earth. And the deeper it seems, the more we see higher structure and viscosity and taste, and these healing stories seem to accompany it. So yeah, I mean, we can go on about that for a while if you like, but I think we were leaning into where the whole the whole story of my healing journey also took
Right,
me.
right. Quick question before we continue. Do you think that like when we have microplastics within our system, within our blood or whatever, and the water is so these people had a very low level of microplastics within their bodies. Is the water pushing that out through your sweat glands, or how do you feel like that the microplastics are actually leaving the body?
Well, imagine if you get a thorn or you cut yourself, right? Then lots of things happen to fix the cut. So we start to see that the first thing that happens if you cut yourself is that the blood starts to coagulate. One of the reasons it coagulates is because there's fourth phase water there, starting to make it more viscous. It's not running out all over the place. It starts to become like a plasma. We've all kind of seen it go from water running to having the water start to have more form. And then eventually it kind of creates this kind of crust, so it stops. And then you might have seen if somebody has something in them, like say it's a little piece of glass or a thorn or something like that, you start to get a bit of a bump happen. That bump happens because it's that liquid kind of plasma starting to form around it to protect, in many ways, the rest of the body. So in that situation, this is a natural process of the body to start to purge and push things out of itself. And so it's a way of protecting the body from the foreign object. And so I had a lot of foreign objects in my body. Interestingly, it wasn't until drinking this water that it really started to almost kick my body back into a remembering that there's something that's not meant to be here. It's probably started to build a kind of mm, like plasma around it, which started to create the bumps that were coming up. And then I'm digging in there with tweezers, and there it is. So that might be the best way I can explain it at this point.
Okay, okay. So then, yeah, let's continue along with your healing journey. So what happened next?
So after I started to have this healing experience, and so did other people, I'm like, okay, well, if I look at an analysis, which is a very logical, scientific thing to do, what's in the water, and I'm seeing, okay, I see what makes it naturally alkaline, and I see, but I'm like, I'm not seeing anything that's really screaming out at me. I think that the secrets are in the subtleties. I always have. And so I thought, I think that there's got to be more to this, because when you're reading an analysis, all it does is tell you what water holds, but really not what water is. So if you take out all of the things that what water holds, then you're left with something that people call H2O. And I have children, and a lot of children, they ask, what is water? And a teacher will say, oh, water is H2O. A scientist will say, water is H2O. And I see these children glaze over. And it's like, oh, okay, well, that didn't really mean anything to me.
A tree is a tree and
But
light is light, but they have special properties.
but that's because we were using this word H2O. The most children remember, if they are taught at school, is that kind of the two hydrogens form what look like ears, and the large oxygen makes it look like Mickey Mouse. A lot of children will say that to me. Oh, it's these molecules. And I thought, well, that doesn't make me feel anything. And I want to feel something from this. Because by molecular count, not by volume, we're 99% water. And there are more water molecules in our bodies than all the stars in the perceivable universe. So just being told H2O, it just doesn't seem to cut it. And so I ended up asking this question to different people. And someone said to me, well, what if the two hydrogens were feminine in the mode of levity, and the large oxygen was masculine in the mode of gravity, and together they create liquid water and balance on Earth? I'm like, well, I really love that. That made me feel something. But over these years of constant research, I ended up realizing and finding out that water is only one part matter. And if you can even call anything so much this matter when you're talking about atoms, but you're looking at two hydrogens and an oxygen, and the rest is photonic light. meaning that water is a lighthouse, a container of light, and that all the trillions of water molecules in your body are emitting photonic light. And that answered a big question for me as a crystallographer, which is jumping ahead, which I can answer later, or I could talk about it now while it's in my mind.
Yeah, might as well.
Well, I have been working in this field of freezing water to a specific stage, and I'll explain how it began in a minute. But at the perfect time when I open the freezer, every now and then, this doesn't happen every time, it's like the perfect timing, everything comes together. I'll open the freezer and you see these little ice shoots starting to form in the petri dish. And around them, all surrounding them, you see that they are surrounded by light. And that light I've photographed and I've seen with my naked eye. And it is light that's actually underneath liquid. So this is when water is liquid and the ice is just starting to form, and you can see light coming out. I actually think it is light that paves the way for the imagery of my work. And I think it is light that is the information highway from the person to the water, that is the receiver. And when water is given the correct environment, which is this freezing state, but when it's not a solid, because I don't freeze water solid, is where it starts to actually push the light out of itself. So fourth phase water can absorb more light, but what I'm seeing is it can also share more light. And so I had an Indigenous First Nations woman say to me that she could speak to bees. And she said she'd watched their hives for long periods of time until one day a bee communicated with her somehow and said, "We don't mind you looking at our hive, but would you mind not looking at it for such a long time? Because your conscious expression is putting too much light in the hive and we prefer it to be darker." And that really helped me understand some of what I was seeing, because if conscious expression is where we put light and water as a receiver and container of light, and then given the right environment as it starts to freeze into a liquid crystal, then it starts to also emit more light to show the form of the information it received. That was a really big piece for me, starting to understand the how is this working. And a lot of my work is organic. All of my work is organic, and I've had this kind of natural progression of just following, oh, what if I do this and what if I do that? And then asking others to help me, because I freely teach my freezing method. And it's like, what do you think? Do you get this too? Like, how can we all work together to see what this phenomena really is all about?
Yeah, it's deep. This is actually the reason why why your work intrigued me and inspired me when I first started hearing about it, was the light component, because it's much deeper than just water, and water being water, it has to interact with light in order to make the magic happen. And I guess for a long time, and I've mentioned on this show several times, that I feel like the most likely explanation for life itself is that life itself is light, and consciousness is light, and that we are consciousness, human beings. I feel like the spirit that we are is captured light that's trapped within us. And when you see trees and plants growing, they're capturing light through the process of photosynthesis. And of course, the tree has light, has water in it from the ground. It's capturing the light in it from the sun, and those two things are coming together and creating the life that the tree is. Crystalline structures that form within rocks. You get light trapped within the rocks, and the rocks, and the light is bouncing in this cavity, and it's creating these crystals, and the crystals are growing. I mean, it feels like and science just ignores this question, which is why science, is I feel like they're stuck. And if we could actually start to define what life is, we could advance more of our understanding of what the nature of reality is. And it just feels like the components of life are something solid. So in the very beginning stages, we have a single cell organism, and it's it gets some light trapped within it, and you see it start to, it's bouncing around, it's going crazy, and obviously it's hydrated. It's the light needs that water kind of as a conduit to sort of freely express itself and to be conscious, to be conscious, to be trapped within, to not be just traveling in infinitely at the speed of light. But once you're trapped, is that what life is? And so for me, that's something that I've thought about probably way too much, but it's what made your work so interesting, is that I feel like, yeah, this is possible, because if water is capturing light, and light goes from moving at the speed of light to being captured within this liquid substance as it cools, and as it's kind of bouncing around in there, that sure, it could be conscious for a few moments, and as the light is captured in there, and it could create something out of nothing. And so it seems like, I guess for me, for a lot of people I know, it seems like, oh, this is pareidolia, there's no way that this could be possible. But if you think about light being consciousness, then for sure it could be possible.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think there's so many things to talk about in this area, even down to when an egg is fertilized, the light comes out. And so I think that as you people begin to see my work and see different examples of my work, there are three things I've discovered, three different types of ways in which water shares information. And I think you can't study water without studying light. You are studying light when you're studying water, because even then you look at infrared light, and that's even in dark places. Actually, Jerry Pollack found that exclusion zone builds with infrared light, which I've got a story about that to do with spirit and near-death experiences, actually. But as we kind of go along, I have some of the most repeatability in my work as a crystallographer than anyone I've seen in the world of water. And what most mainstream scientists say, oh, water can't store memory. It doesn't have memory. It doesn't have any ability to do that. And even if it could, how could it, when the hydrogen bonds are breaking and everything, it's in molecular chaos in a liquid.
but jellyfish can, not to interrupt, but jellyfish have no brain, and they're essentially just made of water and plasma, and they're storing memories. They're
Of
they're
course.
reacting in ways, in new ways, after being hit with the same situation. So that's scientifically proven now. And if it's not water or light that's storing that information and that memory within a jellyfish,
Then
what
what
is it?
is?
They don't have a brain.
Exactly.
So
But one thing I like, though, is that a lot of people say, yeah, it's molecular chaos, so it can't store information. But a quantum physicist will say, well, actually, and they're talking about water outside of a body, right? So they're saying, well, there's a difference. A quantum physicist says there's a difference between molecular chaos and molecular excitement. When you're excited about something, there's something you're excited about. And so if your conscious expression is received by water that sees it and gets into a state of molecular excitement, and then it's immediately froze, there is certainly a different energy there. There is more ability for water to store that and then become into a coherent state where it reflects its last memory, if you will. It's like a snapshot where it's able to show you what it's seen. But my work kind of goes into many other areas, because I was also curious. Because when I had my healing experience and everything, and I started to read, Masaru Emoto's book, Memories in Water, and I learned about a man called Laurent Costa's work. He's a French microscopic photographer who also uses a microscope and flash freezes water and looks at how the water has crystallized. But what's different about his work in Emoto's is that, as well as seeing geometries like Emoto did, he's seeing pictures. So sometimes he'll smile at the water and he's getting smiley faces back. And I do have a shot of that, actually. There's an image of all of these smiley faces a little bit, down in my presentation that your friend has. And I think when you see them, you can't help but smile back at them because it's like this reflection of what it is to be human when you see these smiley faces. And they blew me away. He has hearts in the eyes. He has images of fish and cats and things relative to his environment and his thoughts. And that really was like amazing to me because pictures speak 1,000 words. And then I started to get curious, like, well, the secret seems to be in the freezing where the unseen becomes seen. And at the time when I started beginning to work in crystallography, I was working in research and development with some people around the water that had helped heal me, and we were trying to understand how it was working a little more. And so I had a glass petri dish, and I thought, I'm going to do the most out there thing I can do because according to Emoto, and although the scientific world didn't embrace him, a huge amount of the world did. Because I had about 8 contrasting photos showing the difference of what water structure looks like between love and hate, for example, and that there is clear geometries in an intentional like word like love and not much structure in the words of hate. Then he became very, very famous. And a lot of people started to see themselves as bodies of water, sensitive through thoughts and sounds, environment, frequency, music, and all these kinds of things. And he didn't have repeatability and what science wanted, but he made a difference in a lot of people's lives. And I really respect that. And perhaps science will catch up. And Laurent's work amazed me because I also worked as a professional oil painter for many years. So I started, looking into archaeology, and then I was a painter for a long time, and then I was in research and development for a while, in between having children. And so, I thought, well, if this is real, I'm just going to project a thought into the water because that seemed pretty out there to me at the time. Even though I am spiritual and open, like I think people should try for themselves if they can. And I had seen that someone else had seen something without needing a microscope. Someone called Thomas Hieronymus, who was a radionic engineer, and he'd went into a Parisian meat market on a very cold day where it was like frosty and freezing. And he'd noticed that the freshly placed organs of animals seemed to be affecting the way the frost froze on the glass behind where they were placed. For example, the frost would freeze into the shape of a liver organ above a liver organ, and so on and so forth. And he had this hypothesis that there seemed to be some kind of life force energy still emanating out of these organs, and he put that down to there being water in the blood of them. And each organ has something called a sonic signature, which is like a cymatic imprint for form and function. And he believed that the water in the blood was holding the imprint of form and that it was sharing this information with the water in the air. And the water in the air, because it was so cold, when it hit the glass, took on the form of the information. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And I noticed he was seeing this with his naked eye. So I thought, well, I've got a petri dish and I've got some healing water, although I've used many, many different kinds of water over the years. And I've got my imagination. So I put all 3 inspirations together and I was thinking, okay, I'm going to put a thought in there. And I was thinking, what am I going to think about?
Who was this guy? When did he live? Was he a modern?
Thomas Hieronymus, I believe, 1895.
Okay, so he was seeing this probably in the middle part of the 20th century.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
And so I put all 3 together, and I'm holding my dish, and I'm going to basically just try to put a thought in there. And I noticed there's this bit of fluff floating around in the dish. So I was like, oh God. So I put my hand out and I pulled out the fluff. And I organically thought, oh, I wonder if my hand would have any impact on the water's quote unquote memory. And I thought, well, that thought will do. And I put it into the freezer with the peas and broccoli and everything else. And this is when I froze water solid. And it is incredibly amazing to me knowing how water freezes that I got the kind of imagery I did when I froze water solid for the first year of trying this. So I put it in, I took it out several hours later, I held it up to the light, and I took my very first photograph. And I was freaked out as to what I saw, because the image was of a hand that looked like an X-ray of my hand. It was an undeniable hand.
That's it right there?
Yes. To address pareidolia, which of course comes up from many, and which is understandable when you're looking at art, because art can be subjective. Dr. Jerry Pollack suggested with my work that I put 25 of my photographs together with the question simply, what does this look like to you? And we put it into a questionnaire, and I gave it to people that I knew who basically circulated it through social media. And this was before I was well known. And, well, fairly well known. I'm not saying I'm known to everybody at all. I'm sure there's people that don't know what I do yet. But I say that because it was an important piece. So people didn't know what they were looking at. They didn't know my work already. And they didn't even know that what they were looking at was ice. And so 298 people did the survey, and 85% of people were able to recognize the ice images for what their influence was prior to freezing. And there were 3 where 100% of those people were able to recognize the image, and the hand was one of them. So I think that that's quite helpful. Now, hydroglyphs, which we'll get into, what I was saying, we have a signature pattern. So there are 3 ways that water shares information. You have a signature pattern, where you can identify the type of water it is. So water has repeating patterns for rain, for example. It's like a fanning pattern. Repeating patterns for spring water collected and frozen within 8 hours. Repeated patterns for municipal tap water. So those are the 3 stages of freezing. These are the 3 stages of freezing. So the top one is spring water. The bottom one, the second under that is rainwater. The one under that is where you have water that's gone through a filter. The disordered one is municipal tap water. And then we have a close-up of what seawater looks like. And there's lots and lots and lots of those over the whole dish, of those kind of indented subwoofers that look a bit hexagonal or star-like. Then you have what I call the art of water. And I always say that art is the heart of water. For that one example, I printed out a picture. I put my dish of water on top of it for 30 seconds, removed and froze using my freezing method, which is not freezing water solid. And you can see it's designed an image similar. Now, you'll see throughout all of my work, water isn't designing exact replicas. And if it did, we'd be a whole different conversation.
Right.
The fact that we see something different like this, it's an energetic imprint. It's like an artistic design suggesting that water has the ability to essentially, like a intelligent designer.
So do me a favor, let's take a quick little sidebar, and I think everybody's caught up and understands what you're doing, but it's probably worth it to just walk through the steps, like the exact steps of, how much water.
I have a video I can show you of me doing the technique.
Okay, sure.
And I can talk over it if you like.
Yeah.
It's that one there, yeah. But we did miss the very last way that water shares information. Oh, okay, we're going. So I have a glass petri dish.
Okay.
It's 10 centimeters in diameter. I put approximately 2 tablespoons of water in it. So you want just enough water to completely cover the bottom of the dish. It's a few millimeters above that bottom part of the dish.
3 millimeters,
yeah,
probably.
That should be 3/4 empty and 1/4 pooling when you tip it like that. That's the ratio for any sized dish that's round. And you put less in if it is a smaller dish and more if it's bigger. You can see that I have a regular freezer. There's stuff in my freezer. I like to use the top shelf because it freezes quicker. It is 5 minutes and 30 seconds that I use in my freezer. Now, if you do it and it's completely liquid, shut the freezer and give it 3 more minutes until you see liquid on top and ice underneath. That's what you want to see, 2 stages. I'm taking a photo here of what it looks like so you get an idea of what you want to see in the freezer. And you can see the ice and you can see the liquid. And so when you take it out, you always want to remember to wipe the back. You see different colors in my work because I use the background light. There's liquid and there's ice. Now you can tip the liquid into another petri dish if you want to extend the conversation on, or into your plants. They like it too. And here we have the remaining crystallography. So you can see that kind of lotus pattern and all of the stars inside of it. It's really as simple as that. And so there is a third thing that you might see. So is 2 hydroglyphs in that dish. So if we go back to the 3 ways that water shares information, if you go down.
And there's no light on in the freezer? Does there need to be a light on in the freezer?
No. The light goes off as soon as you open it. So the next one, sorry. So there you see the hydroglyphs. That's the third thing that you could see. So hydroglyphs are repeated symbols in ice. And what's so interesting for me personally about them is that I'm using words as my Rosetta Stone. So hydroglyphs began from music, and something that my son said after reading Masaru Emoto's book, Messages in Water. And he said to me, he came to me very, very concerned. And he said, I think water hates me, Mum. I'm like, why? And he said, and you just looked at the book, and he said, look, water only likes classical music and John Lennon, and it hates heavy metal. Therefore, water hates me. And I looked, but I didn't know you liked heavy metal. And he said, oh, I don't. But see, over here, water doesn't like swearing. And I like Tupac, and Tupac swears. Therefore, water must hate me. And I said to him, water is not in judgment. One of the spiritual aspects of water is that it's more like an observer, not judging, but more like a witness. And I said, I'm pretty sure whoever did the heavy metal probably didn't like heavy metal. And so I said, we need to go on a music journey. Let's do this together, where we do lots of different genres of music. And by that, what I mean is that I put my petri dish of water by a speaker, push play, leave the room, come back, freeze the water immediately. And we started with Tupac, and we played a song called All Eyes on Me.
Very familiar, yeah.
And this eye was designed in the ice. And I have some other examples of the way water shared itself, and it seems to pick out words of songs. And so this song is called These Boots Were Made for Walking by Nancy Sinatra, and you can see it looks like a cowboy boot. And then this one is a completely different genre. So this is Metallica's song Enter Sandman, and it looks like this kind of being with wings, and there's a lot of interesting things in there. And the next one is Redemption Song by Bob Marley, which looks like a tree, but you can see the base of the trunk of the tree is also kind of part of a little bit of a hexagonal pattern, and it's almost like the tree is on the edge of something. And I think that there's a lot of symbology in that. And then I have some others where the one with 2 lines over, you can see the one with 2 lines in the kind of circly thing, that's House of the Rising Sun. Then the one in the middle is Cry Me a River. And then the one on the other side is the bane of so many parents' lives that have little children, called Baby Shark. And then the next one is Tears in Heaven. That's kind of obvious.
Wow.
The one in the middle is Moonlight Sonata. And then the other one on the other side is where water must have some kind of sense of humor, because this is Taylor Swift's song We Are Never Getting Back Together, and you can see the letters EX. But where hydroglyphs really began, and I have done, so many music imagery, but is where we start to see repeatability. And if you click on the next one, we should be able to see it. So with Stairway to Heaven, I kept seeing this sort of stairway, ladder-like image. And after doing it quite a lot of times, I'm like, you know what? I wonder if that actually means stairway. And it seemed crazy at the time, but I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to write the word stairway and use it as an inspiration and see what happens. And I saw the stairway appear. And then over a course of time, 3 months, I did this over 50 times because 50 wasn't random in my mind. And you're seeing 64 examples of this stairway hydroglyph here. And I'm like, this isn't random. This seems to be happening, and not just 1 in 100 or 1 in 10. Each time it would happen. And unless I was in a particularly bad mood, in which case water will not design with me at all, which I think is really interesting. I have if you go to the next one down, there is a video of what the stairway hydroglyph looks like in the ice. So you can see it has the rungs that look like a ladder and the 2 lines. And so I'm like, well, this is really interesting. And then I thought, well, like, what do you do with a stairway relative to that song? So I used the words climb up. And I saw the stairway again, but climb down didn't show it. And when I reversed the song, because some people say, oh, it's some demon song, then I didn't see anything coherent because it wasn't a coherent song to the water at any rate. Then we went with Beyonce's song Single Ladies. And the tagline is, if you like it, then you should have put a ring on it. Like, we're doing all kinds of genres. And because I had seen a ring show up when I had put water on top of a wedding invitation, I kind of wondered, well, you know, is this a symbol that might show up for the word marriage and ring? And so over the course of time, this has taken me 6.5 years to get about 48 hydroglyphs which had multiple meanings to each symbol. I was starting to realize that this is really a phenomena. So this is 64 examples of the ring hydroglyph, also with the energetic meaning of marriage. And I'm using not just English words and not just music, but I use the same word in multiple different languages. And to prove that it's not a bubble, the next video really shows what it looks like in the dish. So you can see there's the plasma ring. And then we sort of scan, you can see those are bubbles moving. And you can see there's liquid and ice in the dish. This is before I even tipped the liquid away. So this is just one of many. I mean, I have others to show, but
Do you get the ring when you're not playing that song?
Well, that's a nice thing, is that what we've started to see is that when I've started to teach people, now that I have some gauge, I don't think I was really noticing everything that was coming up perhaps in the crystallography before, because I go back to my old work and I see, oh, there is a few hydroglyphs in here, and I'm starting to piece them together, trying to understand this a kind of incredible language, if you will. And so I've seen them show up when I haven't used the word. So it's almost like water has been using this as a way to try to help me understand something going on, or express a kind of voice in a way, or of itself. So
So are you just playing, are you playing the music? Like, how does that process go? Are you playing the song as it's freezing or before it freezes and you put it
yes,
in?
I
Or?
play, well, for the music part, I would simply put the dish of water by the speaker, play the song, then come in and then freeze. I leave because I don't want to be influencing it by any feeling I might have about the song. And for hydroglyphs, though, I'm using words, and I stick to the same words. So what I mean by that is I'm not saying the word, that's coming. It's a long process. I use a written word, so I write the word down, put the dish on top of it for 30 seconds. 30 seconds is my protocol. It's not too long, it's not too short. If you leave it any longer and you just leave something in the water and you think it's going to give a bigger impression, that's not what I found. Water is more interested in where your conscious expression or your attention span is. And so then you remove it and freeze. And so what I'm seeing with the hydroglyphs is that I have an ability to be in a very neutral space. This is an important piece, because I found that if you have a real attachment to outcome, water won't necessarily design what you want to see. So water isn't a machine. It's not that you just put a pitcher in it and it just gives you what you want. If you go back into ancient cultures, even go back to old England, in the old times, water wasn't even called water. It was called the waters because it was considered to be a sacred, holy body of water. And when Romans brought plumbing into creation, people started to see their waste being taken away by the waters, and the waters became water. And now we reduce it even further to H2O. And in indigenous cultures like my own, we have a relationship with water. And we don't see it as just something that we drink or that takes away our waste or that we bathe in. Many cultures believe that it is the house of their ancestors, a house of light, a house of the creator. And in all creation stories, water plays such a huge role in that. Even in the Bible, the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the deep. That deep was the waters. And so in the English language, where the waters or waters is still used outside of biblically, is where we say her waters broke. We don't say her water broke. It was her waters broke. So there's this memory that in the old world, the old times, water was considered to be a holy, sacred thing. And for me, the way that water has taught me, I think, has been very gracious and very patient, because I went into this with curiosity and I stay in curiosity. But this one time I was asked, this man, he said to me, well, can you trick the water? Can water be deceived? And I said, I think water is a lie detector test. I have over 64,000 photos of water responding in an intelligent manner. That's not random. And I asked him, why do you want me to, why are you even asking this? And he said, well, if you look at Nikola Tesla and you look at Victor Schauberger, the water wizard, and you look how much genius they had, and you look that they created levitation devices, free energy, talked all about implosion and all these various different things. But at the end of their lives, things turned out really badly for them. And a lot of their work was taken and used for more nefarious reasons. He said, if we could have a world where we're using states of water as technology and it is infused with intention, therefore the water has a foundation or a foundational almost personality, whereby it does not resonate at a lower frequency. And I've certainly seen that when I am angry or frustrated, water won't design for me. In fact, it starts to cloud. Interestingly, the state that I freeze water out at, the ice, it pushes all the solids out. So I'm not freezing water as a solid. It's cloudy because it's frozen in stages. And now you can see that you have started with clear ice, and then as the water froze over that, it started to freeze with all of the salts and minerals and everything in the water. So you have this cloudiness. And if you froze distilled water, for example, you would see a clear ice cube. So water has pushed all the solids out of itself. And now it is this kind of liquid crystal. So when we are starting to think about the way in which this is happening and this water is sharing this information, I'm going back a little bit because I do think it's like a miracle that water shared the kind of information it did. And I do actually have a video of water freezing from beginning to end, sped up, so you can see why I say that. And we were talking about, remind me where I went. I can easily go off onto tributaries.
Well, we should pause for a second,
Yeah.
I think. I'd love to see the high-speed video of the water freezing, Ryan, if you can find that. But just
It's that one, yeah.
quick question first, though. What is like the success rate? So use the ring, for example. If you're freezing water and you're playing that song, if you like it, then you should have put a ring on it. If you do that 100 times, how many times are you going to get a ring pop up in the water?
That's kind of what I was saying.
Yeah.
For my work, anyway, And I think it's because I have this relationship with water. For my work, I have found that in the beginning, before even doing any of this, in the beginning, I would see an image about 1 in 10 times. As my work evolved, and I remember where I was going with that. As my work evolved, I started to see more and more images happening regularly. With this hydroglyphic work, I see the imagery pretty much one in almost every time.
1 in 1?
1 in 1 or 1 in 2. And it does depend on my energy. And it does depend on as long as I don't have an attachment to outcome. So as long as I'm not attached to the outcome and I'm not in a bad mood, then it seems to happen in a very repeated manner.
Like 75% of the time then?
Oh, I would say more than that. I would say, given all the factors of emotional stuff or other people coming in the room or anything like that, I would say at least 80 to 85% of the time.
Okay. And that's regardless. So that you saw that on the Stairway to Heaven?
Yeah, that's where it started.
Yeah.
Because I saw it happen once and I'm like, oh, imagine if it happened again. But this was using the words, though. This is the written word.
I did one before you got here. I froze just maybe 3 millimeters worth of water just to see what would happen, and I got some crazy designs in it, and I could see the stairway thing, on what I froze. I could see. There it is. Yeah.
Oh wow! Oh great. So you used a baking dish.
Yeah. Exactly. So, I could see maybe.
What kind of water did you use?
Filtered, just regular filtered drinking water.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have quite a lot of information in that one. And if I can see it without it moving. So what I like about yours, and have you been doing this for very long?
5 seconds.
Oh, this is your first attempt?
First time.
So this is great. So I always say to people, get the crystallographic technique first and then start using different influences, if you will. But you can see down the bottom, there's a stairway. See underneath the circle where the 2 lines are and the rungs right there?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So you got that. But not only that, you got a bunch of other amount of information. So if I usually zoom in on these things a little more. Are you able to zoom in and go up to the top a little bit? So you have the other way. Yeah. So you have another little stairway up there as well. So you actually got 2. And you also have overfrozen slightly. You see all those little lines around the side? Yeah. So that's where it's starting to the bubbles are starting to freeze. When you start to see too many bubbles, then it's starting to overfreeze. You also have an image that looks very much like your thumb in the part that's not frozen in the middle. See, right there? And then if you move over to here a little bit more, I mean, there's a lot of patterns now. You can start to see it's over freezing when you start to see that line, that kind of, how to explain it?
I do.
Yeah. That kind of separates one phase from another phase. That's where you've started to see it's starting to freeze. But there's a lot of information. You got 2 stairways, so that's pretty good going.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. There's much more imagery.
Well, they also have the beginning of the lotus hydroglyph, which is that's actually they're connected. So right in the corner, on the other side of the corner, right, see that kind of shape that looks a little bit down the bottom, that looks a little bit arched with a kind of nest shape underneath it. You see that kind of nesting with a sort of oval shape. Not oval, but half circle-y shape. So I'll give you an example because I have lots of examples of the lotus hydroglyph. But the lotus hydroglyph is a nesting with a kind of bowl. If we were to tip it up the other way around, we'd see it clearer. And that is the energetic meaning of both enlightenment, and purity. And you also have a little bit of the lines that are crisscrossing in that nesting, and that crisscross is interwoven. So interwoven with your 2 stairways, which can also mean to climb up. So it's like you're climbing up to the interweave of purity and enlightenment.
Fascinating. I feel like my palm has just been read, except it's a much more sophisticated palm. Yeah, that's really cool.
You also have a cross up there, and the cross can mean after Easter.
That's probably a mistake. Just coincidence.
And then over down the bottom, over there, see that those fern, that kind of
Yep.
that
On the right.
yeah, with a
Yep.
line that goes across it.
Yep.
We know that this is a hydroglyph because we've seen it repeat so many times, but we're still figuring out what it is. So sometimes we'll see repeated patterns, and then I start working with different words to try to figure out what it means.
Okay.
I have different people around the world helping me do this.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm not carrying any crosses that I'm aware of. As soon as I become aware of a cross,
it doesn't mean cross,
Okay.
actually, or anything to do with that.
Okay.
What we've seen is that is just a symbol that means after Easter.
After Easter.
And after Easter, Easter is the full moon. So it's nothing like what some people put that towards. It is an old symbol. It's just a line when a line. And what we see is that it simply means after the dates of the full moon that we call, in the West anyway, Easter.
Okay. Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, yeah, it's way more detailed than I thought I would get. I, didn't really know what I was going to expect, but just figured, hey, let's freeze some water, do it one time and see what comes of it. But it's very detailed.
Yeah, it is. And you get so much more in these dishes. And I love that you've used a glass baking dish because you don't have to use a petri dish.
Right. And so, I mean, critics, of course, are going to say, what, pareidolia, or what are they going to say that?
At the end of it all, I've been asked recently a lot, and it always surprises me a bit about these critics, about what to say and what they might say. And I don't really get a lot of it. Maybe it's because I'm not a scientist and I've made this discovery, and that I'm actually asking for a lot of help with what I've found. And I ask scientists, what do you think? And water scientists have invited me to speak at their conferences because the amount of repeatability is kind of a big deal within this. But a lot of things I'm learning, I can't always explain how it's happening, but I think a lot of the scientific world that I have been working with say, well, what you're doing is in many ways scientific. You're showing repeatability. You're showing that that there is this new state of water, because I can show and prove that it's the state I'm freezing it at is not actually really exactly ice. And there's a lovely example of that. So one of my but I'll address what you're saying a little further. I also say that, yes, I did work in research and development, but I'm also an artist. So I would say to people that are like, oh, you're just this or that or the other. Well, I've spent 14 years of my life prolifically working in this field, and I take it really seriously. I also come from a very spiritual way of viewing this, whereby I don't hide that. I weave the science, art, and consciousness worlds. But people could say I'm an artist. And from an artistic perspective, even if the most critical people want to just go, oh, it's absolute bollocks, which is also fine. It doesn't really matter to me too much, because I'm not trying to prove a scientific point. What I'm doing is being advised by scientists, well, I think you should do more repeatability, so try that. And so I do. And then I get them to help me. Well, what about this light piece? It must be a piece. But I also would say don't disregard it simply because it doesn't make sense. There's another option. The other option is that you see it as art. And when you see things as art, you get to ask a different question. You get to ask, what does this mean to me? And what we're seeing is essentially patterns and symbols and art in ice, which is remarkable. This truly extraordinary, because it's undeniable that some of the imagery is so clearly faces, it's clearly hands, it's clearly animals. And then with hydroglyphs, you are really seeing repeatability. And I would say that being able to understand that even children are doing this, and we say to them, you might see a signature pattern, so we can see what kind of water are we working with. You might see an artistic expression, and you might see hydroglyphs. Let's see what happens. Let's have fun with this. And so that's kind of where I'm at. So, I am, in many ways, one of my favorite books growing up was The Odyssey, about Odysseus and his adventures. And Odysseus, you might have heard like the Trojan War, and Odysseus was part of that. And he then went on all these adventures trying to get back home to his wife and his son. And he ends up going on all of these crazy adventures. And there is a time in this story where Odysseus has to sail his crew through two massive problems. One is this giant kind of monster, which is like this giant octopus squid thing that's going to eat all of his men. And the other half is this giant whirlpool, which is going to whirl them down into Hades. And it's going to be a bad situation. And he has to figure out how to go between them. And as he's going between the two of them, that's the path of art between the sort of the science perhaps and the spirituality of judgment perhaps, where we can come together and see, oh, look at this. This is really amazing. This art is sharing a story. So the spiritual people are so willing to embrace it in many ways, but then you can have religious people that might think, but I have so many religious people actually following my work, because in scriptures it talks about holy water. Indigenous people believe that water is sacred. Ancient people believed the same. And there is spiritual people who don't have any religion at all, that just are like, wow, this is actually just something that is proving that consciousness is shared within this work you're doing with water. And I'm often asked, is water conscious, or is our consciousness impacting the water? And I've done various things to try to investigate that. I think it's great that people have questions. I mean, try it yourself. You did. And go in by learning the method. I share it very freely. I'm not hiding anything. And so I think people are very quick to say, oh, it's pareidolia, it's this or this or this. And art is subjective. So yes, you could say that. But for example, 100% of 298 people recognize the hand as the hand. And one of them was a ring, and the ring is a ring, and the other one was another thing. So I don't know, I've done the best that I can with what I've got so far. I've also, I listen to everybody and try to do as many things as I can to simply be the most transparent I can be, which is what water teaches us all to be, and to be heart-centered and as neutral in the work as I can. And in saying that, water has taught me about being in right relationship with it. Because where I was going before was when this man asked me if I could deceive the water. And I was asking him why, and he was saying, well, if we could have this incredible world with water technology where we're working with different states of water, and it didn't resonate at a lower frequency, then perhaps that would be a golden age we could see. And I liked him, and he was genuine. And although I would never do this again, I did do it, and it taught me something. So this is going to sound crazy to some people. And again, nobody's telling me what to do. I have nothing to stop me. So I simply would ask a question, since I've seen water respond in such incredible ways. And I simply said, well, could you please show me something so amazing? And it'll just be between me and you, and I won't share it. And I immediately froze it before the guilt set in, because I knew that I was going to share it with this guy, and I'm not naturally a liar. And so I started to feel worse and worse and worse outside the freezer. I'm like, oh my God. I felt like I probably destroyed this poor spring water that I was working with.
It's never going to trust me again.
No, I know. I felt so bad. And then I pulled it out, and there was some disorder, but there were 2 letters in the ice that spelt a word, and the word was no. And I'm like, oh my God, this is terrible. And although it did give me something amazing, and it was shocking to me. And then water wouldn't design with me. It wouldn't design with me for a whole week. And I thought I'd blown the whole thing. And I
just broke up with you.
I felt like that. I was like, oh my God, no. And so I just felt worse and worse and worse and worse. And I beat myself up like 10 out of 10. And then what I found was that I was really the one that was judging me. Water is not in judgment. And I reminded myself of that. I realized I'd been judging myself, so I actually forgave myself. And I'm like, you know what? You weren't trying to do anything bad. You were actually doing this for a good reason. And I forgave myself. And the very next image, before I even took it out of the freezer, I could already see the heart in the ice, which is the picture straight after that. And so before I even took it out. So sometimes you see that water designs imagery around, so the empty part becomes the image. And sometimes the heart can be the ice as well. So, water has taught me so many things, and forgiving myself is one of those things.
Compassion for yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
How you feeling on a break? Are you good, or you want to continue?
I'm good.
You sure?
I'll have a little sip of my tea.
Yeah, for sure.
But other than that, it's actually now at the right temperature.
Okay. Well, good. Yeah. I want to talk maybe a little bit about consciousness. Maybe we dig a little bit deeper into the consciousness of water and how that works. And do you feel like that it's the light that makes the water conscious, or is there something about the water itself that is the consciousness? What are your thoughts there?
Well, they do work together.
Yeah.
I've not been saying that, not for a long time, because I don't know if water is conscious or consciousness. And a big piece of my years of doing this was to try to understand, is my consciousness impacting the water? Or is the water conscious or consciousness? And I'm like, well, how can I remove myself from being consciously aware? And there were a few ways that I went about doing this. The first one was where I was working with words I don't actually have an image for, like a concept. And one of my favorites was the word ego. So I have no idea what ego looks like. We can't buy ego at a store. And I had no idea of a visual. I only have a concept. So I thought that would be a fun way to kind of start playing with these words, which I knew had a potency. And I'm not telling anyone that water is reading words either. I'd like to say that it seems to be absorbing the energy of a word and giving it an energetic imprint of kinds. So I'm like, okay, so I have an image of what the water designed of ego, and it's designed big shoulders, a long neck, a little face, and a giant balloon head. And I thought, wow, that's pretty amazing.
Mind. Ego is the mind. That's perfect.
And so if we go up a few, there's one where I'm using different languages, and I'll bring to your attention one particular one, the one in Japanese. So I don't write or read Japanese, and someone just sent me this Japanese symbol, and I didn't know what it meant. So the picture to the left of it is the result, which looks a little bit like snowflakes to me. And when I sent it back to her, she said it means yuki, which means snow in Japanese. Above it is the Hindi word pyar, and pyar means love in Hindi, and there's a solid heart. Latin, pugio, is for dagger, and then English, I used the word conception, and it designed what looks like a sperm with inside an egg. So as we kind of can go through of them, maybe the next one after this, and I thought this is cool. Like intimacy, honestly, it could have just shown a whole lot of things. But in my perception, and this is only my perception, and this is also my journey, it looks like two faces touching nose to nose. And in the Maori culture, that's a hongi, where you greet someone, you touch their nose and their forehead and breathe in their breath.
So,
And
I mean, could you repeat that? Could on the prior slide, if you did the snow, if you did that 100 times, are you saying that you could repeat this and
yeah, I could possibly
continuous?
do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still working on different languages and working on all the different languages. And I'm actually also, it's probably really helpful if I do it, because with the languages, I don't actually understand. But there are people that have done the repeated, a lot of my hydroglyphs come from people who have got repeated symbols and shown me, and I've continued on the work. You do have to be, I think, in a specific space for this to obviously happen. With you, you were just curious. That is one of the spaces. Not going, oh, this is bollocks.
Right. Right.
But I've even seen people that don't believe in it at all still see what and be quite taken aback.
Have you worked with people that specifically, not just online, but person to person? Have you worked with people that seem to have as consistent
Yeah,
success rates as you?
yeah. I do
Yeah.
have a couple of people that I
Mhm.
work with
Okay.
that have had not quite as much, but at least 80% as much as me. Yeah. I think that there are certain types of people that just have this. I don't know if there's a certain energy that you have or something like that, because not everybody can, um, you know, have psychic abilities yet. The potential is there, but we don't all have it. Not all of us have currently know that we have psi abilities. The potential is there, but we don't have it. So in this particular situation, I think that there is a relationship somehow that is built with the waters that some people, where I've seen have the greatest amount of repeatability, but I think that stems also from working with the waters so consistently for 14 years and being an observer of water and not wanting to be not wanting to experiment on it. But what I've seen is that water is responding, not just reacting. And one of the ways in which I encourage people to work with water, if they want to see really amazing results with it, is an analogy I'll give. If you go to a petting zoo and you pet the sheep and pet the ducks and all of the cute animals and the deer or whatever, and you have a lovely time, and maybe you feed them and it's all great, and then you go away and say, that was a lovely day. And then you compare that to going into the forest by yourself, being one with the forest, and out of the corner of your eye, maybe you see a deer staring at you. And maybe it will even come up to you and it might let you pat it or stroke it. And that feeling is so different. That feeling is so different because you created an environment safe enough for that deer to want to enter into. And that feeling and that experience is something you'll take away for the rest of your life, compared to an animal that didn't really have any choice. So the fact that the water is wild, or in that situation, the analogy, the animal was wild and chose to enter into your environment because you were safe enough for it to be in, then, there's a whole different type of energy and relationship. I see people sometimes and they say my photos, which are mostly the imagery, and I think that water shows me imagery mostly because I'm an artist, right? That's how I see the world. I see people with more kind of logical minded brains and not so artistic brains see more hydroglyphs. They have more repeatability with hydroglyphs. So I think it shows you what you need to see, not just what you want to see. And it will override what you want to show you how you're feeling sometimes. I think water's more interested in what you're feeling than what you're thinking. And why say that? Because if I'm putting flowers in water and seeing, will the water show imagery of the flowers, for example, and I'm genuinely sad, then I'll see these kind of sad faces in the ice. A while ago, several years ago, I was working for some people and they wanted to try to have some scientific way of proving this. And so they had multiple companies and they invited one of their scientists to come. He was already working on a project in New Zealand for something else for one of their companies, But they paid him for a week to work on this topic with me. And so I showed him, I taught him the technique. I said, look, consciousness is a really big piece of this. Your conscious expression is, I think, the reason that this works, or one of the reasons that this works. I think that water and consciousness are so intimately intertwined that they seem to behave as one. And the light is a big piece, and I really want to address that too, so don't let me forget. But so he said, well, first we have to take the consciousness part out, because we want to see, is water just doing this anyway without any influence? He didn't have very much time to set a whole thing up. He wanted to use robots, but he didn't have the time or space to get all of that whole situation set up. So he just did what he could. And I genuinely don't even know how seriously he took it at the time. So he had his lab, and he had someone program a computer so that about 1,000 different random photos were programmed onto it. And so it flicked through, and he had his Petri dish in front of it, and it would stop on one image. And he gave it, for him, he wanted to give it 5 minutes. He didn't believe 30 seconds was enough. So it's fine, do what you want. So 5 minutes he gave it in front of an image that he didn't see. So he was able to push a button. It did this whole thing. It was set up this way. And then he'd come into the lab, and the laptop back was facing him. So he just came back, shut the laptop. So he never even saw what it was. So he had no idea what the water had, quote unquote, seen. And then the freezer was in there. He froze it using my method. And each day I got a phone call from him. Oh, there's nothing there. Oh, nothing there. Oh, nothing there. And I'm like, oh my God, I thought that this water must feel like a lab rat. I felt really horrible because I have that kind of relationship with water, and he didn't care. And in a way, it actually made it more scientific. That's what happened in the end. I think it was like day 6 or 7. It was just before it was about to stop. He rang me up and he said, okay, there is a clear image in the ice. All my colleagues agree that it was the same image, but it doesn't look like the picture that it was exposed to. I was like, okay, well, what was the picture it was exposed to? And he showed me it was a stainless steel doctor's tray that they put things in when they do operations. And there was a human heart in the tray. And I was like, oh God, okay. Well, what did water show? And he showed me this picture. It was a perfect circle was basically a sad emoji with 2 eyes, a nose, and a sad face. And I said, oh, so you think that water is not telling you anything about that picture? I think water is telling you, where is your heart? And it was one of the many, many examples that I personally have whereby I don't think that water wants to be experimented on. I don't think that relation to the way we go about working with it perhaps is going to give us all of its secrets. I wouldn't want to give over all my secrets on somebody who's trying to experiment on me.
Right. Closed-minded scientist, he's going to get a blank image.
But, he thought it was really interesting. He said it's really
he must
interesting.
Have to take on the task.
Well, he was paid to.
Okay.
I don't think he would have done, actually.
Gotcha.
But he said it was really interesting, but, that was it. Yeah.
Okay. Do you think that the ocean is conscious?
I think water. I think that the ocean definitely is like consciousness. It's like a source, because when you watch how water works, all the tributaries are always going back to source. So it's attracting everything back to itself. So it's just like the primordial waters. And was there a reason that you asked me that particular question?
I guess I'm curious, we talked a little bit earlier, and it's like, is it the water that's conscious? Is it the light that enters the water and allows it to become conscious? Or does consciousness exist everywhere all at once at the same time, and whatever it's in, whatever it's interacting with, becomes conscious itself? So this stool becomes conscious, the couch is conscious, it's emanating energy. I mean, it's vibrating. We know this, but is it, I guess those are for me kind of the three options for how something might become conscious. It's either inherent in the object itself, or it's the light is the consciousness. And there's an interesting experiment, the double slit experiment, where if you're observing light, it behaves differently than if you're not observing it. And it's this huge mystery as to it's one of the properties of light that it's, does it become conscious when it's able to be observed, I think is a reasonable question that we need to ask. And then I guess, the third option is kind of, could consciousness exist outside of light and just be ever present somehow within the ether that we're occupying? And if that's the case, why is the body of water that surrounds the earth, is that somehow conscious? And if it is, then what's making it conscious? Is it the light? Is it what is it?
I think we've separated water from ourselves so much, but I love what you're going with this. I am one of the areas about consciousness and water and consciousness. I have a friend called Moses Hackman that says water is the glove on the hand of consciousness. The more I've started to work with these incredible autistic, non-speaking people who are telepathic through their parent or their telepathic communicator, and many of them can also type and use letterboards. And I've asked this question, what is water? And if some of their answers are here, and they are 100% related to creation and water and light. In fact, one boy says that dew, for example, holds the greatest light between earth and creator. So if we could go up to the first one, like what is water? Like Mikolai, he says, to ask the question, what is water, one must ask, what is the creator before form? And then Daniel goes on to say, and this is Sammy, she says, water is a redeemer. It washes away much like source cleansing you, and the mysteries of water will dazzle you and dazzle humanity. It indeed reflects source creator sentient consciousness. It's the hall of records, the hall of mirrors, and it knows all your secrets. And if we just kind of go all the way down, there is actually if we keep going down, and we get to one where it's about dew. And so Daniel says, dew is the energy that holds the most light between God and nature. So, or creator and nature, whatever you feel comfortable with. This idea of consciousness, though, and water, I think that, I did a study on dreams, because I thought, when am I not actively, consciously trying to impact the water in any way? Or my energy is actually trying to impact the water. And I actually have got somebody who is putting a glass of water as the observer for the slit experiment you just talked about. So I'm really curious to see what happens there, because I've always thought that one of the spiritual aspects of water is the observer. And so I have this dream study during lockdowns in New Zealand. I was in a place called Lang's Beach. And so for 3.5 months, I started to put a dish of water beside my bed with the intention that maybe it captures some part of my dream. And so I had no idea if anything would happen at all. And every single night I would do this. And what I actually found was that when I would wake up, and I also sleep in complete darkness, I had dragged the freezer into the bedroom, and the only light that ever happened was when I would open the freezer to put in the dish. And for the dreams that I had forgotten, when you have a dream and you wake up and you try to remember it and it disappears, well, that would be the only time I would freeze the dishes, because if I remembered the dream, then I could be projecting something. So I would stick them into the freezer, and what I found is that the imagery from the dream world was actually even clearer than the imagery in the waking state. And then you kind of look at Aboriginal beliefs about the dream time maybe being more like the real time. And so I was so curious because what happened was that for each image, 9 times out of 10, it would jog my memory of my dream. And I'm like, how can water accompany me through the dream time if it is not an observer of some kind? And perhaps is it reading my subconscious or my unconscious state? Like, what's going on here? Because it started to get more and more interesting to me. And it was almost like water was the remote viewer. And it was remote viewing me as I was dreaming. And I do have some images of the dream time just to give an idea of clarity.
You haven't tried it with this 99 or 9.9% alkaline or 9.9, what is it?
Oh yeah, a lot of my work, it's a 9.9 in pH.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I have. I've worked with that a lot.
Okay. And does that produce different results than regular filtered water?
I find it working with natural waters like artisan waters and spring waters shows really great crystallography, beautiful artistic results as well. Whereas I don't work with distilled water because distilled water will only show me like a signature pattern of distilled water, but it doesn't show me complex crystallography. And I think that's because it lacks the salts and minerals. I think it's the salts and minerals that help water to store information for longer. So we're not a body full of distilled water, we're an ocean. And so I think it's this, if you pardon the pun, you boil us down. We're water, salts, minerals, and consciousness. And so in all living things, there's water and salts. I think it's the salts that also help water to store that information. So for these three, so the first one, I was dreaming of sheep. And it was like a cute little guy. And then the middle one, I was on an ocean with big waves in a boat. And then the other one, I was walking along railway tracks.
Wow.
And, you know, I thought that was pretty interesting. And it led me into wondering, we have in the Maori culture, there is a very special word for spirit called wairua. And wairua, if you break the two words apart, wai is water and rua is two, is essentially the two waters, the spiritual and physical waters. So I was curious about the spiritual waters and could I connect to spirit at all through the waters? And I wanted to see something relative to my mum who had died in 1999. And so I simply asked, and I know that sounds crazy to some people, but can you please connect me to my mum? And my mum and I had a lifetime of memories together. She was my best friend, so I had zero idea of what water might show. And so I was just missing her. It's been a while. And so when I froze the water, to give context for what you're about to see, I used to live in Japan. And my mum and I would write letters to each other because it was before, you know, cell phones and computers and everything. And at the end of every letter, Mum would make an attempt at drawing a circle, and her circles were so bad, sometimes they looked like maps of Australia. And then she'd do a little heart in the middle. And that was the picture that I got. And then I thought, oh, that's amazing. And then each year on her birthday, I asked the same question and I got the same result, except her circles are improving. So that's really great. But then someone could say, oh, but now you're expecting to see this. And so now that's why you're seeing it. I do find that interesting. I do get that a lot. People say, oh, but now you expect to see something and now you're seeing it, which says in itself that water is reading my mind. But the next picture is where I said, and I didn't know what the outcome would be, and that was that could my mum connect to both my sister and I? And my sister had a different relationship with mum than me, and I didn't know what would show. But this time, there's a pretty good circle with a heart at the top one, and then there's a misshapen circle with a heart in it. Well, I wouldn't even say that's much like a circle. It's a pretty bad circle, mum. But, you know, it's there. And then after the picture afterwards, this is my grandmother, Revis. I never met her. She was pretty radical back in the 40s and she ditched my grandfather. She remarried somebody and they went from England to Miami And from Miami, they caught this plane called the Star Ariel. It's the same kind of plane. I think that this was a picture of it. And essentially, then they were going on their honeymoon to Barbados, and the plane went down over the Bermuda Triangle. And to date, if you Google the Star Ariel and the Bermuda Triangle, it comes up as one really unexplained reason. There was nothing wrong with the plane. There was perfectly good weather. Everything was good. But yeah, it was no reason why it should have disappeared. They couldn't find any trace of it. And I always wondered about her, like, what happened? You know, what's going on in the Bermuda Triangle? Because I'm really interested in the ancient mysteries. And I thought, well, you know, perhaps water can help me. And so I simply put the dish of water on top of an article that was sent to me from some friends in England that found it about, see, it says former Hull woman and missing airliner. That's about my grandmother. And so I was thinking, you know, what happened to the plane? What happened to you? And so the next image is the design that water created, which looks like a vortex or a portal of kinds. And it's a very unusual way for water to freeze as well. So I thought that was really interesting. I want to extend that conversation on further. So I think that water can teach us a lot of things. And one of the areas I've really focused on, which is also one of the reasons why I started even working with some of the autistic non-speakers, was because I was really, really stuck on one particular hieroglyph. This hieroglyph shows up for the word information, and it looks like coding, and it looks like ancient language. And this last year and a half, I have seen that it has shown up over and over and over again, 8 out of 10 times for nearly everyone, without using any words. So I'm like, I have to focus on this because there's more here to learn. So last year I gave a talk at the annual water conference in Lisbon, and I was only showing repeatability. It was the shortest talk I ever gave because all it was here is the image, and this is what I did, here's the video, and here's a lot of repeatability. But I couldn't help it. I wanted them to see, like, look how much this looks like ancient language. So I got 4 images of this coding that I see in ice and that everyone is also seeing. And I compared it with ancient hieroglyphs and also cuneiform. And this guy took a screenshot of it and put it into AI and said, find the ancient languages. And so AI automatically found the hieroglyphs and the cuneiform, but it also recognized pieces of the imagery. If we go back one, pieces of the imagery in these as hieroglyphs and cuneiform. So I thought, oh, well, perhaps AI can help me further because I have way more images than this. And so I ended up not working with AI for long, for 3 days, until I realized it wasn't the direction I wanted to go, because I'm really interested in biological intelligence rather than artificial intelligence. But what it did help me with was the next image, which you can see it took the background out of that image. So it's starting to show us what the coding really looked like in it. And when you close in on it, which is the next image, and then you can go a little further, you can really start to see there's something here. But I had really no idea how I was going to break apart piece by piece all this coding. And that was as far as I got until I started working with this community, and I showed them 12 of the images here, and then I showed them another 12. And I said, what are these? What are these? You know, what's going on here? And I asked them all individually, and they had very common answers. And the main across the board answers were that they are doorways to consciousness, and that each little line is a doorway to consciousness, and that there is sound that comes out of them, and that in the witnessing of them is certain types of healing. And so if you go to the one underneath, this is Sammy. And she's saying about what this is about. She says the general messages of the images, the message of the images about foundational structure to build or co-create the new. The images are like music, actually, sheet music, to inform everything that is matter on the planet, that a cosmic cycle has closed and a new epoch is beginning. And the way the lines are is like foundational structure at the pre-manifestation levels. And then Daniel said, which is the next one, they are doorways into another realm of consciousness. Each code is a doorway, each little line is a doorway, and it represents God consciousness experiencing itself as multiple doorways as God consciousness experiences itself through multiple humans. And Veda is uncovering something that has not been seen before. She is unveiling a consciousness that is ready to be seen, but a direct translation is difficult because it is not writing as we know it. It is all multidimensional form, and one must take into consideration angles and colors in the way the writing is connected. And I want to focus on the word doorway because it is the best word I can give to what these hydroglyphs are offering. It is a doorway of a stream of consciousness that goes deep into the cells of the body because our bodies are made up of water. And then if we go through here, there was one mum, and she just showed her son Kyle the pictures, and he spoke the word doorways. And so there is this consistent kind of doorways and realms of consciousness coming into this. And so these people, I really want to understand, they do have a voice. I've seen them answer the questions telepathically, confirmed through ways. Some of them can say some words and they can say, you can say it. Is this your voice? Is this what you're saying? They know how to say yes. They know how to say no. They can type, they can write. And some of them write these out for me. And I've watched telepathy happening in real life, and I have seen this for myself. So I'm not working with a lot of the children from the telepathy tapes, just a couple, but some of the others approached me, and they are amazing. And what they have to share, I think, about water is where we can take a quantum leap from what we think we know about water to what we can know about ourselves as bodies of water as well. Because I think what I have seen is that water reads potentials. I can put a sunflower seed in the water. It doesn't design the seed. It will design the outcome of the seed. It will design the flower. I have some images of that. Another example would be the apple seed. Apple seed in the water, it designs the outcome of the seed. And then when you let that melt and refreeze it a couple of days later, the apple image is still there. And then you let that melt and leave it a week, and the image of the apple is there. So it takes the potential of the seed and designs the image of the apple. Same thing with a flax seed. I see the pods where the flax came from. So over and over and over, and I have done some repeats of this. If we go up to the top one there where you see the seed, I remove the seed and it designs the outcome of the seed. And then underneath that, a year later, I did the same thing. And then underneath that is the flax seed. Underneath that is the apple seed and designing the image of the apple. And that was the actual apple that I used. But when I used an empty pistachio shell, well, granted, I didn't freeze as well as I would have liked, so there wasn't as much water in it, but it designed an image of the shell, so it wasn't reading the potential of the nut. So that was really interesting. So if water is constantly reading potential, and we have trillions of water molecules in our bodies constantly reading our potential, waiting for us to step into it, I kind of like that idea quite a lot.
Incredible, incredible. So, I guess my only other kind of thoughts or questions are like, where do we go from here? What is the research going to reveal? How can we use the knowledge that you have and the things that you found out to advance our understanding of reality or science or medicine or whatever it might be?
Well, there's a number of things, at least with hydroglyphs, that we could potentially use it for, and some that I've already started working with. Feel like the woman there from Arrival, who from the movie Arrival, where I have to try to decode this language of symbols. And I mean, I'm really just touching the tip of the iceberg, which is why I need help. And we could potentially use these hydroglyphs to start to understand languages which haven't been deciphered yet. There's a really interesting thing that I've seen whereby I see the conception hydroglyph, which is two circles that touch with the energetic meaning of conception, and accompanied with a circle on its own, which is complete. So complete conception. Now, I've been working with an amazing woman called Pam Gregory, who is an astrologer. And she asked me, can you do crystallography nearly every day if possible? So we can start gauging, is there any changes in the crystallography when there is a new moon or a full moon or an eclipse, for example? So as often as I can, I use rainwater for consistently. So I'm using the same water each time. It has a very consistent pattern. That's what I have coming out of my tap in New Zealand. We don't have municipal water where I live. I live rurally. So I see the same fanning pattern over and over and over. Just before a new moon, a full moon, there is like this opening up that looks like a bit of a kind of smiley mouth shape, I suppose. But and then there's a full moon and it shows this kind of oval shape. And then a day or two after, it immediately just goes back to grasses. With solar flares, sometimes there is a change. With the new moon, though, for the new moon, we see always the same image. It is two circles and one circle, so it is complete conception. For all the new moons, we always see this. But also for the ancient world, even crop circles. For a couple of crop circles that are deemed to be genuine, I have put a dish of water on top of them, see what would happen. And we see the same symbol, the complete conception. And also, even in Göbekli Tepe, when I put an image of Göbekli Tepe, I see complete conception. When I put the image of Göbekli Tepe of the T pillars with like those basket things, I see the image for seed and several images of the same seed. But we also saw not just seed, but we saw an embryo in the ice. And I have an example. I sort of have an example of what an embryo looks like in the crystallography, and light is a big piece of it. With all embryos or babies, I see light from their head around their spine, which I think is reflective of the cerebral spinal fluid.
So you think that the handbags on pillar 43 are carrying are for seeds?
Well, again, this is at its most rudimentary stage, and there are multiple words associated with each other that can be part, but seed is a recognized hieroglyph, and I have seen multiple of them along with an embryo when I put it on the pillar. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. And actually, I've seen this. I was in Sedona and we went to a place where they have petroglyphs, and that same exact symbol was a petroglyph. So it looks like a coffee bean. If you imagine a coffee bean shape with a line, yeah, it looks just like that. So being able to see them show up and help us start to perhaps understand some of the ancient world, I think that there's a lot of potential there. And I'm working with a lady now where we're seeing what would it show for different hieroglyphs. Maybe when you see that coding that I just showed you, it does resemble the structures of hieroglyphs. So how did they ever decide even how to form those things? Years ago, when I was a lot younger, I had a really vivid dream. It was like a vision dream. And I was walking in this ice cave, and I knew that I was in Antarctica. And I was walking in this ice cave, and in the walls of the ice were lots and lots and lots of symbols. And some of them look like what I'm seeing now. So I don't know. I've been working with some water from Antarctica actually. I have quite a lot of it, and it's extremely old. Or water, though it goes through this hydrological system. How do we even know how old water really truly is? But I do see the same symbol appear, which is a circle with a line underneath it. And as I'm still trying to learn this language, we know the circle means completion, but I found out it can also mean children. And the line underneath can mean father. And the father's children, it's so, there's so much more to learn. But it seems to be advancing really quickly. I have a lot of people helping me now. A lot of even archaeologists are like, hey, we should start collaborating here. Maybe there's something we can learn. In November, I'm going to Egypt for the first time. And I'm going on the kind of primordial water tour where we're going to be collecting water, put water inside the pyramids, going down the what is it called again? The Osiris shaft. Yep, and there's water down there. So we'll collect some of that water, do crystallography.
That'll be interesting.
See what happens. I think water might well reveal a lot of things that we're ready to see. And I don't think we're seeing this for no reason. I think that we're starting to become ready to see this visual voice of water and what it can share with us. And we're starting to get ready to hear the voices perhaps of people that we haven't even been able to look at, let alone imagine that there's someone in there. We're starting to realize, oh, well, there's this happening. And so I think the world is such an amazing place to be right now. For me, water is definitely a kind of spiritual teacher, teaching me how to be transparent, how that it is a mirror, and I think it is a mirror of something divine. I'm very grateful to be here. I'm very grateful to be doing this work now, and that through my own healing journey, it's led me all the way to here, all the way to having come so far in this work. It's just, people think I get used to it, but it blows my mind all the time. And I sometimes have to process something for an entire year. But, it's a great time to be here.
For sure. That's cool. That's really cool. So what about your book? What is, do you want to maybe talk about that for a minute or two? And what outside of what we've covered today can people find within your book?
Oh, there's a lot more in the book.
Yeah.
We've touched the surface. So there's over 1,500 photos in my book and a lot of text as well. So I cover all manner of things from the science to water and creator, to water and creation, to the dream time, to learning the method, to how water responds to words, to music, huge music section for all genres of people. The science is also super interesting, and it really goes quite deep, but water and creator goes really deep. And a friend of mine talks a lot. I have different people coming in, and I said, could you please write something also for the book? And she talks a lot about hydrogen. And she says that hydrogen essentially means hydro water, Genesis, the creator of water. And that just looking at the sun, which is so much hydrogen and evaporation, it's like the sun bringing its children back home. And so we get into all manner of different things. Frequencies are a big one. A lot of people ask me about that. Also homeopathy, I've done a lot about that. Energy healing is also there. Asking water to show a symbol of a significance in the ancient world. That's really interesting. And it kind of goes on and on. I've been asked to do so many things, so I've shared as much as I can in the book. It's a thick book. There's lots in there, and there's a little something for everybody, I'd say. Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating work. It's very thought provoking. It's really cool that you're the first person to kind of recognize that this phenomenon is is real and it's possible. You know, it's amazing that it took humanity so long to realize that this is possible. um,
Sometimes we're a little slow on the
a little bit,
uptake.
yep. But in any case, thank you for doing it, and it's a fascinating topic and to explore. And it's like, I mean, why is it so difficult for people to believe that water and light and matter could create, you know, some imagery? I mean, they do incredible things. When you look at, you know, you've got water, you've got light shining on the planet, you've got water raining onto the planet, you've got trees sprouting and growing and showing off this beautiful life that they are. And why couldn't that happen within just a petri dish of water, you know, with light on it? It's not a big stretch of the imagination to think that this is could be a real phenomenon, and it's certainly worth more exploration and more more you know, scientific analysis, if that's even possible on such a topic. But in any case, really appreciate you doing it. Really appreciate you coming on the show, and I hope to have you back one day.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So, what else? Did we miss anything?
Well, did you want to touch on those images? You said that looked really cool.
Sure. Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
That's not it's the work of somebody else.
Okay.
It's I mean, yeah, there's so many images that we can look at, but it was the one you did further down, and if I actually go back up a second.
Oh,
Yeah,
that right.
yeah, I
Right.
think you really wanted me to talk about not that one. Sorry, that yeah.
Is that ice on the left and the right?
None of them are ice.
Okay.
So this is all about water and light. So this is called ITC photos. And when I first saw imagery like this, I thought it was AI. And so I disregarded it completely. I'm like, no, this can't be real. And then I went onto this man's website called, his name is Hans Kennis, and ITC stands for Interdimensional Transcommunication. And in his opinion, if you go back in history to the ancient Egyptians, even, and the ancient Greeks, they would do something which could be called hydromancy, where they would look into the water to see if it could show them like long lost loved ones or something that might happen in the future. And so he is talking about essentially what he thinks is spirit showing itself through the water somehow. And all you do to create these, and I was like, are you sure this is like a real thing? Because I don't want to talk about it unless it's like a real thing. And so I went through his very comprehensive website, and there is so many images. So all you do is you get a silver pan, and you can use a saucepan. You fill it a quarter of the way with any kind of water you like. Doesn't matter which kind of water. And then you have a light source, and the light source could be as simple as your oven light, for example. And then you move the water with a spoon or anything. And then what you do is just get your phone on live. Yeah, you get your phone on live, and you essentially just take photos after you've pulled the spatula out, and you take photos as quick as you can. And then all you do is go through your phone and you go through the photos frame by frame by frame until you see the imagery. And so it's not like you're projecting consciousness or any of those things. And I did a post about this on Instagram, and so heaps of people went to try it because it's just everybody can do it. It's not hard. And with the kind of phones we've got now, we can capture things really quickly. And so I wanted to try it myself, of course, to see is there anything here. But after sharing it on Instagram, I've had hundreds of people send me pretty amazing images. And so a couple of examples that I have were the first I tried.
Yeah, those are incredible.
So these
are from you?
No, these aren't mine. This is from different people who are off Hans Kennis's website. So underneath, these are some from my first rudimentary try. So you can see the nose and the eye and the mouth and the lips very clear. And this one looks like a grizzly bear trying to like eat my wooden spoon. And so it's really fun. It's kind of addictive. I warn people in advance, but there's something to it. I can't, and you can see I'm very interested in the light aspect. See all those light squiggles? I've been actually also photographing, although it's not in this presentation, photographing how the light forms a kind of coating as well when it is on top of the water. And there's a lot more to it than I think it just being just water and light. You could say, oh, it's just squiggles, it's just water and light. I think there's more to everything when it comes to water and light. The baby one we might want to show, there's an embryo picture a bit further up, I think. Yeah, here. And so this one was from a woman who was pregnant, and I asked her to drink some water whilst thinking of her baby and then leave me some to freeze. So this embryo showed up with this bright light around its head and spine. But what's interesting is this is from two perspectives, although it's quite bright. In the actual original photo, the image down, I don't know if you can take the light out of it a little bit so it's clearer in that one, but see that kind of hand shape and light? It's much clearer in the original picture. And so it's seeing from two perspectives. So the mother was holding her belly at the time whilst drinking water. So from her perspective, she's imagining the child, which is seen there. But from the baby's perspective, it could be that the hand and light might be what the child saw or imagined from the mother. And then the lady went for an ultrasound the next day, which is why that comparison is there. And I think because that's cerebral spinal fluid, I think that light is representing that. I have a friend called Dr. Mauro Zapatera, who is a Harvard doctor and specializes in the CFS. And he believes that the cerebral spinal fluid is the portal to cosmic consciousness. And he started sharing something which I'm so excited that he's sharing because I've known about this for years. And many people wouldn't even believe that it's a real thing, but it's absolutely true. So the next slide after that one, what we're looking at here is a brain scan. This man had a perfectly normal life. He was from France, but he was in a car accident and they did a brain scan. They found he only had 10% of a brain, 90% of his brain was missing. And the cavity was mostly filled with cerebral spinal fluid. And there was a doctor called Dr. John Lorber who had been studying this phenomena for quite some years. And he said that he saw more miracles show up in his office than anyone could even imagine. He said people would come in with virtually no brain at all, and half of them would be severely disabled. But the other half, the ones who had the least amount of brain in their head, were intelligent, fully functioning, often had a high IQ, had nothing obviously wrong with them, and he'd only find it because there was some kind of an issue that happened, such as a car accident, a brain scan, or something like that. And so that really, if you're attached to the idea that consciousness is stored in the brain, it's a really difficult one to look past when these fully functioning people, some of whom only had a brain stem, and yet are highly functioning. So that, I think, then lends into the idea of intelligent water. And then you were talking earlier about memories, I wonder if I've seen water's not stuck in time and space. If you go up, there's a good example of that. See the one, this is where I put my thumb in the water and I removed it. You can see my thumb is up there and you can see the nail is very clear, but you can see there's like a chip in the nail. Well, I chipped my nail in exactly the same place 3 hours later. Mm. And then there is an image of somebody else's work because I love to share. I've got lots of examples of, these are examples of all my work. Like that dog with the nose, the dog smelt the water and it designed the nose. The cat, that's our cat Luna, she looked at the water and you can see it's like she's looking back up. The top one with the schnauzer dog, I was at a cafe and they had a bowl out for thirsty dogs and there was a schnauzer dog drinking from the bowl and I was thinking, man, I wonder what that dog bowl water would look like. And I asked for a takeaway cup and the lady was like, oh, you want a cappuccino or whatever? And I'm like, oh no, I want to take some dog bowl water away to freeze. Anyway, I went straight home and froze it. And it's clearer in the book, but you can even see the back of the dog's back. And it's like an etching. And then if you go up further, The next slide. So here you're seeing different imagery of flowers and things that I have in the kitchen. And then the next one is man-made things, because we're seeing only biological things, and that's not a problem for water. And then this one's really amazing. This is a Maori pātaka, which was a food storage hut, and you can see the complexity. But what we're seeing is not an exact replica, and that is a really good example. We have like an energetic imprint that is still recognizable. It's kind of like if you had a room full of with a vase of flowers and on a table, and you had 10 artists come in and you asked them to paint it, they'd all paint the same thing, but it would look different. It's kind of like what we're seeing.
It's water's being artistic.
Yeah, and the next one is where we see that water can read information from things we don't even know what's going on. So you can see the consistency of the eggs. I've taken the eggs out of each one and frozen it with no egg in it, and you can see the consistency there. But this one's different because it looks like there's something inside the egg. Well, I was getting free-range eggs from someone who had free-range hens and also had a rooster. So there's a chance that they could be fertilized. When we cracked this egg open, on the yolk, you could see that actually it was a fertile egg and water had read the information first. So that's just a tiny little bit of some pretty amazing things.
Incredible. Yeah, it's amazing work. No, I really appreciate it. Yeah, what else? Did we miss anything?
Going forward, I think that what we find at different sacred sites will be very telling. And I'm being very guided as to where to go as well. Like some of the autistic community have shared with me that I should hold the vessels of water that contained water, and that there will be information even just in the touching of them, and that there are certain places that hold very sacred energy, and I'm really been instructed, and it's almost privately, to where to go, where to do crystallography, where to put water. I do find that this work can also pertain to healing. So one of the most important things that I've learned from my children was that once you freeze this water, as we've talked about, it's at a special state. It's pushed everything inside of its outside. So it's pure water, essentially. And one day I was holding up a very beautiful dish, and my daughter, Shanti, she asked if she could have it. So I gave it to her, and she started to eat the ice. And I said, "Oh, what are you doing?" And she said, "Oh, it's good for me, Mummy." I was like, "Oh, okay." And then her brother did the same thing several weeks later and said the same answer separate to her. And now I've taught thousands of people around the world, many of whom are parents. Their children just keep eating the crystallography. So I'm like, wow, what do these children know that I don't know and that I need to learn from? And so with the understanding of the power of words, I was like, well, I know my body is an intelligent fluid body of water. So I reckon I'll have a healing word in here, because I had a headache. I don't normally get headaches. And so I'm like, okay, let's try this. What's my word? So without thinking, a word just popped out, and the word was purple. So okay, I'm going to work with that word. So I wrote the word purple, did the process, and ate the ice. And within 5 minutes, my headache had gone. So I'm like, that is really cool. I'm going to start sharing and see if other people get the same results. So over the last couple of years, I had well over 200 people try this using words. And we've had everything from constipation change and improve to people with insomnia. It takes them about 10 days doing it every day, once a day, to actually sleeping through the night for the first time in 4 years, to headaches going away, to various things. So I think that given that that's basically free, and it's fun, and you've got nothing to lose, then there may be something to that too. No clinical trials or anything like that. I'm not there. We're not there yet. But I think that it's something that is good for us to learn from our children. And you can also work with this technique. Well, I've started to work with it a little bit in diagnostics. So I had a sore stomach. I'd gone out and had dinner with a friend at her house. And so I put the dish on my tummy because my tummy hurt. And there was a very clear image of a carrot in the ice, which surprised me. And why it surprised me was that, so my friend had made like a casserole, and I rang her and I said, were there any carrots in the casserole? And she said, yeah, I chopped them up really finely, but yeah. I was like, oh, that explains it. Because after my car accident, one of the only things I still have trouble digesting is carrot.
Let's do this. I want to leave the audience with a picture, and I've got some Egyptian vases that I would like to show you.
Mm-hmm.
And let's take a look at them. Let's see if there's any of them that stick out to you that you'd like to pour some water into.
Okay.
We'll freeze the water and we'll see what happens.
Sounds wonderful.
All right, we'll leave the audience with that picture. So.
Okay.
Awesome. This has been amazing. I've really enjoyed it tremendously, and you've opened my eyes up to a new possibility. So can't thank you enough for coming on the show, and it's been great. So I appreciate you very much.
It's my pleasure.
Yep. Awesome. We'll close out there.